people are coming to Great Britain to use their freedoms and prosperity to really attack both Great Britain and to cheer on or to celebrate autocratic illiberal movements in Gaza or the West Bank or Iraq or Syria, whatever their homeland happens to be. In other words, they could never protest like that in Gaza, even if they were gay, if they were transgendered, all these celebrity causes here, they would be put in jail in their own homeland. Yet they cheer on from a safe distance the very system they fled from.
Victor, what a dangerous time. Historically, of course, we have a gathering storm, the likes of China, Russia, Iran, North Korea. And then here at home, we've seen these widespread pro-Hamas rallies over the past few weeks. You've talked a lot about radicalism on American college campuses. What has been your take on the larger ramifications of these protests?
There's a lot of ramifications. One, I think we've dispelled the liberal myth that there was a difference between anti-Semitism and being anti-Israel. They don't make a difference. When they chase Jews into the Cooper Union Library, they don't ask them whether they support Israel. When they rough up Jews or bar them from going where they need to go in class on these major elite campuses, they don't ask them their political sympathies. So that's one thing. And let's get rid of the other kind of exaggeration or lie that we're just pro-Palestinian, we're not pro-terrorist, we're not pro-Hamas. They're flying Hamas flags. They openly cheer on Hamas. They make no apologies for that. I don't think these universities also are elite anymore. For the last 3 or 4 years, following George Floyd, they abolished the SAT score and the comparative ranking of GPA, high school GPAs for admission. A lot of these students, according to the university's prior standards, which they had assured us for decades were essential for their own prestige and preeminence, they're not qualified. And so they're either giving all A's, like Yale University gives 80% A's, Stanford about 65 where I work, or they water down courses. So a lot of these students, when they're interviewed, what is the river to the sea? What's the river? What's the sea? What does 1947-48 mean? What is Transjordan? All of these issues that they yell and scream about, they don't know anything. Yeah. So I think people are coming away with saying, these students are very unimpressive. If I were to hire them, they would go straight to human resources and complain, and they don't have analytical or computational skills. Yeah. And so that, I'm not saying all the students, but this, and then finally, I think people finally understand there is no dichotomy in the Democratic Party between a radical squad or BLM or Antifa or radical Greens or the Middle Eastern radicals. Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, Joe Biden, they're pretty much joined at the hip now. And this is the new Democratic Party.
The UK held a number of elections last week, and as expected, London's Muslim mayor Sadiq Khan was re-elected to a record third term. But there were also other significant Muslim inroads throughout the UK in cities and towns with large Islamic populations. Meet Moteen Ali, who was just elected to the Leeds City Council and is seen here celebrating his victory. And remember, this is Great Britain you're watching, not Gaza.
We will not be silent. We will raise the voice of Gaza. We will raise the voice of Palestine. Allahu Akbar!
Folks, you may be shocked by that scene out of the UK, but this did not happen overnight. It's been a long time coming. Hoover Institution senior fellow Victor Davis Hanson is back with us. He's author of the blockbuster new book, The End of Everything. Victor, I see what's happening in the UK, and it brings to mind two topics that you've talked so much about: the effects of mass immigration on the West and the decline of Judeo-Christian culture. Is Great Britain a harbinger of what could come to the United States?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, we let in a lot more, both in a percentage-wise and in actual numbers in Great Britain. We've never been in this territory before. We have 55 million people who were not born in the United States, 16% of the population. That was an enormous challenge to integrate, intermarry, assimilate people in our values. You mentioned the Judeo-Christian tradition as well as constitutional America, civic education. We're not doing any of that. And the result is that We have no idea who's coming across the southern border. We have no idea why they're here. We do know that 100,000 Americans are dying to fentanyl. When we look at Britain, they are not able to integrate or assimilate Islamic populations. And it's kind of ironic because people are coming to Great Britain to use their freedoms and prosperity to really attack both Great Britain and to cheer on or to celebrate autocratic illiberal movements in Gaza or the West Bank or Iraq or Syria, whatever their homeland happens to be. In other words, they could never protest like that in Gaza, even if they were gay, if they were transgendered, all these celebrity causes here, they would be put in jail in their own homeland. Yet they cheer on from a safe distance the very system they fled from.
I think the big question, Victor, a lot of Americans are asking, and great point, by the way, is why? Why would our elites in Europe, in the U.S., across the Western world, why would they allow this to happen? Why the wide open borders?
I think there's two types. I think there's a left-wing elite who feels utopian and they want to help the poor of the world, and that they're wealthy enough and influential enough, right zip code, right title, right degree, that they're insulated. So they don't experience the real Grand Valley or the inner city of Chicago experience with illegal migration. And then there's another group, the same political side, but they feel that their agenda does not resonate with 51% of the population. And so therefore they welcome people in, both to change congressional districts by using residents in the census counts, but more importantly, they see this as a future investment for larger government, tribal politics, more entitlements, and they do it for naked political purposes. I think that's why the Biden administration is doing this, and it's helped by very naive people who have one reality, and that is they're never going to be subject to the consequences of their own ideology.
Yeah, we're going to talk more about the end of everything, your great new book, Victor, but you're a military historian, a historian on many levels, but some of the warning signs we see here in the West, do you see that pattern throughout history when empires fall?
Yeah, I think they do. They get very naive and complacent, and they feel that their walls in the ancient world will never be breached because they're so formidable or their reputations are such. And then insidiously, very gradually, they start not to invest in defense or not to invest in civic education or not to remember who their neighbors are and how dangerous they are and how dangerous people who don't hate them and want to destroy them are. And they get into situations in which they have no idea what's going to happen. And I think part of that is part of that paradigm. We're suffering from affluence and leisure and complacency, and we're not investing in defense. We're not investing in civic education. We're financially imperiled with this $36 trillion debt, and we have enemies who want to take advantage of that: China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and we seem to think, well, we're the United States, they can't do anything to us.
Victor, you talk about not only the end, but I mean the sudden end of empires, not so sudden in some respects, but to some it may seem overnight. The end of Carthage, a Greek city-state, the Aztec civilization, Constantinople. Is that even more possible? I mean, almost seemingly sudden annihilation today with the obvious nuclear factor, nations wielding nuclear weapons. This seems it could happen faster than ever.
Yeah, or with chemical weapons or bioweapons or artificial intelligence. In the epilogue, I talk about all the existential threats. I mean, North Korea has the ability to wipe out South Korea, and it keeps promising to do so. We just ignore it. And not long ago, the Turkish president said he wanted to send missiles and annihilate Athens, and over a dispute in the Aegean Sea. Of course, Iran almost habitually says they're going to wipe out Israel. Rafsanjani 20 years ago said that Israel was a one-bomb state, and it was a miracle that half of the world's Jewry was in one place, therefore making their extinction possible. So we have all of these threats. In fact, one of the ironies was China has threatened to absorb Taiwan and says it really never existed, and it's going to reabsorb it back into the Chinese mainland. And I wrote about that in the epilogue, and all of a sudden the Chinese translator and Chinese edition, which has been treated me pretty fairly and has a big market for other books. They told me either to get rid of that line or they were going to cancel it. They were so angry about it, and I couldn't, so they canceled the Chinese edition.
Stunning.
So it shows you that they're very sensitive to this because they're making daily threats about reclaiming Taiwan and then ending the idea of a Taiwanese culture. There would be no dialect that was Taiwanese. There would be no Taipei would revert to being a communist city, and there would be no memory of an independent Taiwan.
This is, Victor, it's stunning what you just shared. And by the way, we mentioned earlier that, look, much of the West is kind of just whistling past the graveyard, so to speak, as all this unfolds, and much of it at and inside our doorstep. With the book, it seems, in just listening to you and watching your great speeches and appearances over the years, especially in recent months, did you have a real sense of urgency in writing this book right now at this point in history?
Well, I started out as just historically curious, but the more that I started to study these sudden collapses, I noticed there was a pattern, that they all were very naive. They all kept looking to their past rather than the present or future. They all had no idea about the existential threat outside their walls. They all believed that Alexander the Great was he had been trained by Aristotle, or Scipio was with the historian Polybius. So they didn't think these people had the ability or the desire. But if they had been rational and looked at the actual status of their society vis-a-vis the conqueror, they would have been terrified. But there was a sense of complacency about all of them.
We're indestructible was almost the sense. Hey, we've got about a minute left.
Can have.
Of course. We talked about the decline of Judeo-Christian values, civilization. What, in your view, historically, being such a great historian, what role does that, the collapse of spirituality in a society, does that play a major role in the ultimate collapse of the society writ large?
Yeah, it does. From a very pragmatic view, when you have a population that doesn't believe in transcendence, that is, that their conduct on this world will affect in some way their soul in the next, then they live for the moment. They feel that this is all there is, the corporal existence. There's no transcendence. I don't have to worry about what I've done, either evil or good. It's all here, and therefore I'm going to satisfy my appetites. That's a much greater propensity. Our wisdom is completely knowable, and we can find out everything there is that makes the world operate by human agency. And there's no mystery that's resigned to a deity or religion. It's all explicable, and that's kind of the arrogance of the Enlightenment. And we're in that stage now with our universities, especially, where most people feel we are God on earth, and then we have to be, because there's nothing else, and there's no such thing as a soul, and there's no memory of what we do on this earth. And collectively, that can be really dangerous for society. Our founders knew that. Even the ones that weren't Christians believed in deism, that Christianity was valuable for the body politic, even if they didn't believe in it.
Stakelbeck Tonight, my all-new nightly series on current events through a bold biblical lens. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an upload, and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. And don't forget to share your thoughts, insights, and comments below. Thanks for watching, and God bless.